I've been working on this passion project series for a few months now. It's led me down a crazy path to discover this ever-evolving story about a wandering cowboy struggling to find meaning. After 2 chapters drawn and painted and written, there's just one piece of the puzzle left to go. The first 2 paintings were kind of like a mixture of writing and drawing simultaneously. It was intuitive and it flowed out of me. But this is the finale, the pinnacle of the journey. What it's all been leading up to. And I gotta stick the landing. This time I was gonna write out the finale all at once, before doing any drawing, to make sure I tie up all the loose ends and give the story a satisfying conclusion, in the text and imagery. I always had a general idea of what the ending would be and where it was heading. Okay, so I have my protagonist, my antagonist, and our supporting characters here with a new character for the 3rd painting here, the mage. Now we just gotta take all these things and tighten it into a nice little bow. So here we go. But to actually write it out word for word is a different beast. A task that would prove to be much more challenging than anticipated. There was so much more pressure than the previous 2 paintings. How does the cowboy get what he wants? The difference between needs and wants. Wolf's motivation. How does he reach the main? Can I do flashbacks? I really want to do this right. After a week of reading books, studying films, and spilling my guts onto the page, I had my script. Now that I had my story written out, I could find the major beats and write them out for reference during the thumbnail process, which also proved to be quite tricky. I have to think about a lot of different things while drawing. Convey the story I've written and complete the 3rd act in one image on a canvas. Try and hit all the key moments in a compelling and visually clever way. Try and visualize how I'm going to tell the story in the final reveal and how that will play out. Also tie this 3rd painting into the other 2 paintings to create a pleasing triptych and have that visual chemistry and progression represented. Also try and leave some room for interpretation when you're looking at the canvases by themselves, and possibly let the viewer come to their own conclusions from their own point of view when looking at the finished triptych. That's quite a lot to think about. My head felt like it was going to explode. But my main concern was the cowboy, as this was the culmination of his journey, and I wanted a big portrait to convey his emotional arc and that visual progression as he gets bigger throughout the canvases. It was definitely tricky, but I think I worked out some kinks here that I want to find a direction to go in. You can see how I started with this first idea here with the cowboy here and the wolf down here. That kind of evolves into this. Maybe they're fighting on top of his hat. Maybe I tried something else to get rid of the cowboy head completely and do it down here. And I brought it back for this one. I really like this part here, kind of echoing that first canvas, but it's on top here, facing the other direction. And then I split them up here, but it's still kind of similar, same kind of deal here. Missing the mark here, and then I started to run out of ideas and kept repeating myself. And then I thought about doing this one. I really dig this one. And I think I'm gonna branch off of this one a little bit more and see how we can come up with to really nail this one here. And let's move on to stage 2. Let's go. I landed on a pretty decent image that captured everything that needed to be there. I kept exploring to see if I missed any opportunities that I hadn't seen yet. But the more I kept twisting and trying to make it different or dynamic in one section, it would fall apart in a different section. Sometimes just keeping it simple is best. And the more obvious choice is sometimes the better one. The dynamics between this one and the other canvas compositions were undeniable. I felt this image fit perfectly into the themes of the whole series and matched up really nicely. And I'll show you exactly how it all fits together later on in the video. But first, I gotta get organized. Instead of having all my note cards disarrayed and strewn about into my inspiration lost wherever in the ether, I organized it all in one super hub here, right on Milanote. Milanote, who's a sponsor of this video, is a handy digital tool designed to help you organize your creative projects. Think of it like a digital sketchbook where you can keep your ideas free from clutter and brain fog. As you can see here, I've gathered a whole separate mood board for my inspiration for what I have planned for the third painting, while still keeping the old one intact in case I want to go back to the second one. You see, instead of scrolling through tons of image libraries or folders on my computer and forgetting where I put everything, I can just see everything right here, all at once. I can make notes myself for later, circle important items, or make changes super easily. I've also created a bit of a story outline for this project and where we've gone so far and where we're heading. And without dealing with all this crap. So that's nice. And Milanote has been so handy, I plan on using it for my zine that I want to make at the end of this project to celebrate the whole process of all the paintings and all the thumbnails and sketches and everything. But if you want to use it and you're scared of a blank page, Milanote has over 100 built-in templates for designers, illustrators, any creator really. Milanote is available for free right now via the desktop or the app with no time limit. So sign up using the link in my description and start organizing your thoughts into your next creative project. So thanks to Milanote for sponsoring this video. Let's move on to the next step. Feeling a little rusty, so before I dive into the full sketch, I want to get some practice and studies under my belt for those two characters. I searched up some references of some cool cowboy actors, and did some quick ballpoint pen studies to get a feel for what I wanted my cowboy to look like, and the lighting that I was going for too. Same with the wolf. Figuring out what a regular wolf looks like and how the snout and teeth works. Then branching off and starting to come up with my own interpretation and make it a character. I would even go the opposite way and make a cartoon version, and then find a happy medium somewhere in between. Now I'm geared up and ready to go. Let's just see what happens. I'm using Procreate on my iPad to create the final sketch. The story and scope has naturally increased as I kept going with this project. It's exciting and it's also incredibly challenging. But I find that when I become uncomfortable and challenged is where I tend to thrive and make big breakthroughs in my creativity. Being uncomfortably comfortable in a challenge is the sweet spot. I definitely want it to look like part of the series and not have it sway into like a movie poster territory or something. I like the fine art canvas angle the project has been so far, and I'm trying to keep it that way, with a little narrative twist. In my head, I'm thinking about which parts of the story I want to put on the canvas, and then which parts I can then maybe animate or mix in live action scenes or something cool for the final reveal. That way I don't feel like this one is too jam-packed on the canvas. But before I get ahead of myself, there's something that I think will help me out a little bit. Sometimes I like to grab a figure here and move them around a bit, or just kind of get a general sense of energy or pose that I'm going for. I can exaggerate it in the drawing if I want to, but it's nice to kind of have a little base to start with right here. And it's also fun, Look at that. That'll work. I'm using a drawing method called reduplication or something like that from comic books, where you have multiples of the same figure showing evolution of motion in one single panel or frame. I took a bit of that technique here for the final showdown. It's so cool to think where this project and this story took me. It took me on a journey just as much as I created the journey. I never would have thought I'd be drawing cool werewolves and writing epic conflicts when I started this project so many months ago. But that's really what makes it so much fun. So last time I ended up including a hummingbird right after they nested outside my studio, and I found a cool way to include it in the story. Now this time, I got something else to add to the mix. My new cat loves to hunt down these little guys. But most of the time she's unsuccessful. But sometimes she will scurry back into the house with a tiny little tail wiggling in between her teeth. The thought of lizards detaching their tails from their bodies was so fascinating to me that I found a way to include it in my story for the third act. Not in a cat hunting kind of way, but more like a metaphorical, emotional kind of way. Delivered by the mage witchy character. I started off by drawing her in this kind of basic, rigid pose, but it needed some tweaks to make it more interesting and dynamic. I fixed her hands and created a new position of her face, which I think makes it a little more interesting and breaks up the frontal views from the rest of the canvas.
Yeah, just a lot of cool cowboy gear. And I don't want to forget my night latch.
When I'm illustrating, I want to make sure I do it right. So it often requires a bit of research so I can understand everything and make sure I'm not representing something incorrectly that would throw off the whole thing. Even how a cowboy would just stand next to his horse. So, with all that laid in, the drawing was finally complete. And I was really happy with how everything was shaping up. Alright, now on to the color study. But first, Professor Kiptoe is going to show you how this whole triptych fits together so smoothly. Alright, sit down. You're about to get learnt. I'm going to show you how I built this whole thing. And I'm going to try and do this without spoiling much of the story here, so let's take a look. So, started with our base center staging here, right? Center staging, keeping it nice and framed up. Center staging right here. We have our composition going across like this. Cuts across, boom. Across, like that. We have a focal point right here. Focal point. Focal point. Over here we have these two elements here on either side. In this case, the evil forces working against the good aura. Then we flip it. We have these good forces working against this evil aura. And then of course, they clash at the end. We have our arch as it comes across here in the beginning, and then as he goes on his journey, he gets a little more broad, a little more flattened out. And then as we come across here, it gets a lot more flattened out as we end up facing off against our fear and our foe here. And of course, we have our main hero here, small and mysterious when we start out, and then as we get going, it gets bigger and as we learn more about him, and then our rising action continues, boom! And of course, our bookend shot of him on his horse facing this way, and then as he rises up, him off his horse facing the other direction. And then finally, as you can see here, we have this V shape coming up, and then it goes down this way, and then it comes back up this way. So it's kind of like this zigzag going across the whole triptych here to show his ups and downs of his whole journey here. So that's why I built this whole thing from one initial painting to a whole triptych here, and really excited. Let's get going on the color study. I went into the color study with a somewhat general idea of what I wanted it to look like, just based on the other two I've made and their color layouts. Blocking in big shapes and then adding on top of that is always my go-to. It's easier to see the big picture when there's a lot of color on there already, and I can just carve and shape it like a sculptor. These swirly colors have crept into my work a lot recently. It's a lot of fun to do, and it's relatively simple. And it fits this part of the story, where he really starts losing his mind. I started adding some more paint layers on top and got some of these really cool happy accidents where the streaks kind of blend the figures into each other and morph them together. And it really creates a powerful dynamic in this scene with the blowback effect against the fire. This is getting pretty metal. That's okay though. I like the intensity. I like the action, the conflict. Boom. Yeah, it's good. I like it. And as I finished the top of this canvas, everything was coming together nicely. And the finale to the series was finally ready for action. Now, after all the writing, all the planning, all the drawing, there's only one thing left to do. So hold on to your saddles, because we're going in for a fight.